Hi, this is Himang, your host at Innovation Sports and Life. Today, we are talking with Vinod Bhat. Vinod is a CFA and an investment management professional. He's a senior vice president and a portfolio manager at a very large financial corporation. Vinod has done his BTech from IIT Bombay, and he has done his master's and holds an MBA from the Wharton School of Business. Today we talk about the world of finance and kind of get into some of the behind the scenes for what goes on at really large corporations that handle investments. Vinod, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Hemang. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So Vinod, I think the world of finance and investments is kind of two-phased, right? On one side, there is a whole lot of information which is available to everyone. Everyone has an opinion on those things, and yet you can't act on every insight that you collect,
Right.
right? So if you can, can you just tell us, what does your daily work look like?
Sure. Yeah. So I'd just like to go back a few years. See, I was not into finance originally. I'm an engineer, right? And but I got interested in investments because I read a biography of Warren Buffett, who is my role model in this field. And I got to know that he's an avid reader. He spends the majority of his day just reading, and I believe he reads about 500 pages a week. And in between, there was some miscommunication. I read that it was 500 pages a day, so that was my kind of target, to read 500 pages a day. But then somewhere it got clarified that it's actually 500 pages a week. But just that, that is kind of what I set out to do. So when I started working in the field of finance, I wanted to read a lot. And of course, I was reading a lot earlier, but more of fiction and books and, not really related to business. But as part of my job, reading is kind of the center of my work essentially. So I start my day a bit early because, first of all, after I wake up and get ready, I check what global markets have been doing, like US, Europe, and even Asian markets open at that time. I look at how currencies, commodities, interest rates have moved. What are the main headlines for the day? And then because we are a large investment firm, we receive a lot of reports from sell side brokerages, both global and domestic. So I quickly scan through some of the daily updates sent by the global brokerages because they talk about some of the key developments that have happened in US, for example, what the Fed is looking to do, or in Europe, or what's happening in China, for example, now with the COVID lockdowns, or what's happening with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So I have to quickly read through them and just kind of try and understand the key points. I also read reports from all the domestic brokerages who again give a daily update in terms of what's happened in the Indian markets the day before and anything to note, right? So the reason I do all that is because before the markets open, just before 9 a.m., I have set a target for myself. Like for the past 6-7 months, I send a daily update of just 5 or 6 bullet points. I started first doing that for myself initially. Then I started sending it to my investments team. And I got good feedback on that. And then I started sending it to our sales and marketing team so that they could also keep update of what's going on in India and globally. And I got very good feedback on that. And our head of sales suggested that I share it with some influencer, like financial advisors in the community and so on. Then I started doing that. And after some feedback I received, I started sharing my thoughts on social media also. So I started with reading. Then I thought, try and summarize or communicate our key insights, with the people around me. So I started doing that. And finally, I took the next step of, thinking of, how can I make it more interesting for readers? Because not everybody is in the field of finance, right? Like people may want to just understand what's going on. They may not have the same time or interest or capability to really understand technicalities. So I started trying to think how to make it more simple and entertaining and more engaging for the readers. So that's been kind of the journey, but that's still not my complete day. So that's
Right.
what I focus on. That's just you can say before 9 a.m. Okay. where I do all this reading. I kind of try to bring out five key insights. That's my objective, and share it with everyone. And by that time, it's 9 or 9:15 a.m., right? And at 9:30 a.m., we have an internal team meeting with all our analysts and fund managers, so that everybody shares their views and insights, and I contribute my thoughts there. Then from about 10 to 11:30, because I manage some funds also, I
Okay.
spend time on that in terms of assimilating whatever my learnings have been, and whatever is happening in the markets, if we need to take some action in the fund portfolios. Then from 11:30 to about 12:31 till about lunchtime, I do some more reading. And the way I kind of try to schedule my day is, the first half is all I try to keep it for myself in terms of my reading, my writing and communication, my fund management. And post lunch is when I may have meetings, like either some internal meetings or meetings with external strategists, economists, analysts who come and meet us, or nowadays we do it virtually also. uh, or if there's no meetings, then I continue with my reading, because we get a lot of reports, both from industry research firms, from sell side research firms, and so on. So whatever time I get, I try to use it for reading, and then communicating it with my team. So that's how my day is. And some part of it flows into the next day. So whatever key points I've noted, I use it for my next day's communication, if it makes sense. So that's kind of my day. And initially I used to keep track, like, because I told you my target was to read 500 pages a day. So I used to note, like, if I've read a report, 5 pages, another report 10 pages, and my target used to be to reach 500 pages a day. Then I realized it's actually 500 pages a week. So kind of, I cooled off a little bit.
So all this information, right? It's a mix of various things, right? Because let's say what the markets have done previously in other geographies and all that,
Yes,
that may give you a sense of how things are likely to happen today. Meaning that's probably like just immediate impact, that say
yes,
here's how the market can open up. So there's a bucket of information which is like that.
yes,
Then there's a bucket of information which is probably reports which are telling you about, let's say, performance of a specific sector or a specific company.
right,
And that might be a near term or a mid-term thing. And then you have a mix of probably a long-term thing, that, hey, where are things headed,
exactly.
next year or 2 years down, and all that. How do you compartmentalize all that? Because, let's say all of your reading, let's say in the morning before your day begins, is probably going to be like a cocktail of everything, right?
Yes,
So how do you decide that, okay, this is what I'm going to act upon today, and this is what I'm going to say that, okay, here is what I need to have a bookmark for how things can play out from an investment perspective.
right. No, very good point, Hemang. Exactly, the way I think about it. Like, when I'm going through the inputs I'm getting in the morning, I prioritize, like you mentioned, the things that I think will impact markets on that day, right? And then what I do is, as I'm quickly going through the emails and other inputs I receive, right? I have a process of kind of just marking for myself which is intermediate, which is long term, okay, and which are some interesting things that I have to read, right? So the way I do it is, the first kind of part of the day, like before 9 or before 10 a.m., is where it's all like, short term, what might impact markets on that day, right? And then, like I mentioned, I use it for managing the funds also. So, like, till 11:30, it's all about, like, that particular day, okay. Then after that, when I get some breathing time, then I start reading up about maybe something that's, maybe 1 or 2 years kind of, outlook, right? So those kinds of reports, either for global markets or Indian markets, or for certain sectors, right? uh, but the more interesting thing for me, because I'm also the equity strategist for the team, is to take a more medium to long term outlook, like, maybe 3 to 5 years or longer, right? So the second half of the day is where I try and focus on that, because then, like, I've already acted upon most of the short term information, and whatever steps have to be taken. So the second half of the day is where, if I have the time, then I focus on the long term report. So, for example, what could be the impact of the Fed actions on the US economy or global economy in the long term? Or, for example, what could be the impact of the Russia-Ukraine conflict in the medium to long term? Or what could be the impact of the Indian government's policies for the Indian economy, right? So that's what I focus on in the second half. And also, like I mentioned, we try and meet a lot of the domestic and global strategists, economists, and the discussions are largely focused on that. So there is some little bit amount of time we spend on, of course, the short term actions and what's happening in the market, but the discussions are focused more on the 3 to 5 year time frame. And that's how we try and get those inputs. But that's exactly how I compartmentalize it. And thanks a lot for bringing that point.
I want to touch upon a bit more on that aspect, because this 3 to 5 year goal, like
Mm.
figuring out what the strategy should be, requires a lot of deep thinking.
Yes.
And these days, I've been reading a lot about deep work and sort of a theme of this slow productivity, where it's not fast paced, it's not rush, get things done in 15-minute chunk, and I have your 5 year plan ready. It
Right.
requires a lot of time to assimilate the information, make your own opinions about it, and all that. And that, if I contrast it with your world, as an outsider, my perception of the the world of markets is that it's a very chaotic world. There's a lot of information coming, hitting you
Yes.
left, right, center.
Yes.
To mix that along with deep work, I don't know how we're able to get time for that. So is there an approach which has worked for you, or some of the people that you admire, that they are able to carve out time successfully in this chaotic world?
Yes. So definitely, it's very challenging. So one is, we get a lot of inputs, written inputs, like, over emails in the form of reports, right? So that's one. But also, many of the sell side analysts, strategic economics, they want to call us and talk to us and highlight what are the key points. Plus, we also have our internal discussion. So time management is always a challenge, and focusing, being, first is getting the time to read, and second is being able to focus on what you're reading. Both of them are big challenges. Initially, I had to overcome that hurdle because I used to try and read everything, right? And also try and have discussions with everybody who wanted to kind of, speak or have a call, right? Or I try and attend every meeting that was scheduled, because meetings are happening throughout the day in our office. They're not just organized by me. They're organized by everybody, and a lot of it seems interesting, right? And that's one aspect I like about my work, because given my role, I need to keep track of a lot of things. I need to be up to speed on a lot of different things. Like, even though, like, we are a mutual fund, we invest in stocks and fixed income and maybe gold. We have to keep track of, okay, what's happening in the crypto world, for example, or what are the new things coming up in startups also, right? So a lot of things are happening, and I used to initially, I used to like to keep track of everything and try and get involved in everything, but quickly I realized it's not going to work, right? Like, so first step for me was to compartmentalize my day, like I mentioned. Like, kind of, I have now three chunks, like, immediate, and the next 1 or 2 years, and the medium to long term, and I try to do it like that. Second, I now understand, for example, of all the inputs that I'm receiving, which ones to prioritize, which ones will be useful, right? So, which ones to read first, kind of. And because I've been doing this for some time now kind of I know who are the people to listen to or read their inputs first. And that's the second way I do it. And third, I have learned to say no a lot, like, so just like I don't read every report that comes in now, I don't attend every meeting that is scheduled. I don't accept every call that is requested. If possible, I try to delegate it, or, like, redirect it to some colleague. And just in terms of then being able to focus, right? Like, because I mean, I like reading, so that's not a problem. But kind of, I have to protect my time from these other obstacles, or, like, and I've learned it over time. And of course, some people don't like it when you refuse a call or a meeting, right? But you have to do that. Like, I the second half of my day, I try to have some meetings, but try to keep some time for reading, and that's how I'm doing it.
And how do you measure progress, for a long-term goal? So short-term part, I think that's the nature of today's world and all that. That anything which is immediate gets done.
Right.
Anything which is short term, we have, let's say, weekly or monthly targets, those could get done. But let's just say in your reading you came across, and I'm making this up as we talk, that you made an opinion on how the economy could be headed, let's say over the next 5 years timeline.
Right.
But it's just a calculated guess at this point of time, right?
Yes.
And probably every month or every quarter you may have to check whether your assumptions are still valid.
Right.
Do you keep track of those things? Do you see how your long term view is playing out?
Yes. So, I am also the head of knowledge management for our team. Uh, we try and maintain a database of key data points, both for India and globally. We maintain a summary of the views we receive from the sell side and research and industry research. So we keep track of who is saying what, and then we also keep track of what our own views are, and what have been our actions and whether we need to change anything. So we have a process internally where every Monday morning we have a meeting of our fund managers where we discuss our views, how we are positioned, what has gone right, what has gone wrong. Every fortnight we have a meeting with our analyst team where they talk about their sectors, what to look at, and so on. So there is a constant review. Okay, and like I said, every morning we have a morning meeting where our team meets together and we discuss views and see if whether we are on the right track or not. But like you correctly mentioned, see, things are very dynamic when you talk about stock markets or any other market, right? And so everything is a work in progress. Okay, so you may be thinking one thing today, but tomorrow China imposes a lockdown for COVID, everything goes for a toss, demand for commodities goes down, or suddenly
True.
Russia invades Ukraine, right? So you, everything goes for a toss, right? So it's a work in progress, and the way I do it is just after being in this field for this time now, kind of I've developed a thought process for myself where I start with the global macro. I look at, for example, when I say global macro, it means what's happening with global growth, inflation, interest rates, commodity prices, and all that. Then second step is India macro. So what's happening with the growth in India or inflation rates, what the RBI could do, and so on. Then the next step is to look at corporate earnings growth. Because of the first two factors, how could the corporate profitability, how different companies could get impacted, how could various sectors either benefit or get negatively impacted, right? That's the third step. Fourth step is to look at valuations. We always, because we are in the market, we look at, okay, how are different stocks or indices or different sectors, which valuation multiples they are trading at, what could impact those valuations. So for example, if interest rates go up, the valuations are going to go down most likely, right? Then we track foreign investment flows, we talk domestic investor flows. So these are like 4 or 5 steps just in terms of the thought process. And for every step, there are a few key data points that I have shortlisted for myself, which I track. Okay, and essentially it's now a question. So this is basically, and then I have a framework of thinking. Like I mentioned, one is a short term. Short term, I mean the next 6 months to a year. Okay, the medium term is 3 to 5 years. Long term is like 7 to 10 years, right? So I have that framework where I have split up the time horizon into these buckets. And then I think of India versus the rest of the world. Like, how will India compare to the rest of the world given an event? So this framework and those 5 steps. Now, any event that happens, I try to run through these 5 steps and the key data points that I have and see, okay, how could those data points get impacted, right? So, for example, if Fed is raising rates, right, what could that mean for the US, for the other global economies, for India, and kind of that helps to develop a view. And since every day I'm now communicating this internally with my team, with outside, it keeps me on my toes, and it's a work in progress. Like I said, like you can't really uh, see, you have kind of to have some view both for the short term and medium term and long term, but then should be able to keep on updating that view as new information comes in. So that's like almost like what we call the Bayesian theory, basically.
I can't help but wonder. I think it's a probably engineer brain at work here, because
Yes.
for each of these, I see like switch case. Okay, switch near term, medium term, and long term, and each of these is, you sort of have a flow chart or like a
Yes.
structure approach, which is probably helping you.
Exactly, exactly. And you're very right. Like, when I was in the US, I'd gone to Las Vegas and, I went to play poker at a casino. And I guess it was just beginner's luck, but I was doing well. And I was playing there for about a couple of hours. And then there was one gentleman at the table. He looked at me and he said, "You are an engineer, right?" And I said, "Yes. How did you figure out?" And he said, I could figure out by the structured way in which you are playing. Like, you must be an engineer. Like, so.
Yeah, and I think being engineers, we are somehow trained to even adapt to randomness.
Yes,
That's it's like a variable. We're like, okay, that's a random variable.
correct, correct.
So we can't predict what that chaos will be. But if we have a structure, we're like, okay, let that randomness, come into play. We'll see how it affects, and if required, we'll modify the weights. So
Exactly, exactly, right. So that's what from outside, like you mentioned, I noticed the word you said chaotic, right? The markets are very chaotic, and from outside, that's how it feels. But once you are inside, you think of it more like markets are like dynamic, basically. Okay, so things are changing, but you try and bring some structure to it. Okay, and then adapt yourself, adapt your thinking, adapt your actions, and because markets are moving very quickly as fund managers, like we have to react to it. Of course, we have our medium to long term views, but then we have to adapt our thinking and our actions to what's going on a daily basis.
the reason why I say chaotic is probably because of my WhatsApp groups and my immediate network. So I come from a family of business people and Gujaratis. So everyone loves to be in the stock market.
Yes.
Everyone seems to have these WhatsApp groups where tips are being circulated left, right, and center. There's a whole lot of noise which comes that way. I'm not saying everything is invalid, but that's the thing, right? Where you get so much of this noise, there must be some valid signal in that.
Right.
Then I turn my attention over to Twitter, where FinTwit is like a big term nowadays. And lots of interesting ideas which are being shared. And this is all, let's say, from the retail sector.
Right.
There's opinions are there in every aspect that you can think of. Technical analysis, fundamental analysis. And I just like to be an observer. I'm not caught up in that. But for me, it's like, wow, man, there's so much of information which is just coming from the everyday person. And then, someone like you is, of course, exposed to it at a personal level. But apart from that, you also get access to this high quality information from the various terminals, subscriptions,
Right.
and your own analysis. So, in that sense, it's just whole lot of information overload. And to make meaning out of it, I don't know how you guys do it.
Yeah. No, definitely there is a lot of information overload, and the way to handle it, at least the what I do, what I've seen the best fund managers do is first to have your own view. Okay, so like I said, I have my own framework, my thought process in terms of the step, what data points I am tracking, and my view based on that. Okay, and then what I do is every input that is coming in, I just get a sense: is it supporting my view or contradicting my view? Okay, if it's supporting my view, is it just something same or similar to what I already know, or is it something new, right? So if it's same or similar, then you can quickly pass on it because you already know it. If something new, then you make a note of it, right? Either you write it down or you have a call or a meeting with that person to understand, like why they looked at that thing and is it correct? Is their analysis correct? Similarly, if something comes in, some data point of view comes in that is contradicting your view, then again you pay more attention to it. Okay, if it's something you already know, again you pass on it. But if it's something you didn't know, if some interesting analysis, some different aspect, then again you pause and you spend some time on it to try and understand, or you have a call or a meeting with that person, right? And based on that, you adjust your view. Like either your view becomes stronger, or you take a step back and think, hey, maybe I need to rethink my view, basically, right? So, but that at least helps you keep going in a particular direction. It's not like you get up and based on a WhatsApp message you go in one direction, based on a Twitter message you go in other direction, right? Like, so, or based on even from the research that we get, there are contradicting views. Like we have two, if I have two meetings in a day, like one view could be positive on a particular sector, another view could be negative on that sector, right? So but we have to come up with our own view on that sector or stock on the economy, right? So so that's the endeavor essentially. And The best way to not get confused at the end out of all of this is to have a framework in mind, have a thought process in mind, and try and develop your own view first before you try kind of to process a lot of inputs.
Do you also keep a track of these are things that we are happy ignoring? Because the opportunities are limitless, right? There's so
Right.
much happening, and you can go deep down into any and every sector that you want.
Correct.
But then, and I guess what you said does make sense from what you uh, what you made a view on, what aligned with it, what what moved in the opposite direction. I think that's fine. But then there would be areas where it's a missed opportunity, where you saw that something that took off in a very new direction, and hey, that's something that we should have caught, but it missed uh, our domain of knowledge that was available to us. So
Yes.
how do you keep track of these missed opportunities, or is it more like, hey, we'd rather define the playground in which we'll play?
No, it's definitely like, you keep on, it's a work in progress, like I said, like, you have your framework and data points that you look at. But if something like that happens where, like, you miss something, right, and it impacts the markets, then you have to think of, okay, how can I bring it into my framework? What are the key data points that I track, right, that I need to track? So something like, for example, what's happening in China, right? Before 2 years ago, like China was on the economy was on an uptrend, consistently doing well, right? Now suddenly things have changed, right? So it's tough to know what the Chinese government will do, what's the new regulatory action they will take, how that will impact demand for commodities and, like, supply chains and so on, right? So now there is a lot more focus on China and trying to get data points from China. Because earlier it was very clear that Chinese economy will do well, so that will maintain, demand for commodities will continue doing well, and exports from China will continue doing well and so on. But now we track a few data points just related to China, because it has a big impact on markets. Like it has a big impact on commodity prices. It has a big impact on inflation, right? So in a way, that's something that we have added, like, to my arsenal essentially. So it's not just looking at, for example, US data points, right? We also now have to consider what's happening in China and include that. So that's something that, that's an example of how things change. So it's never a set uh, piece kind of a thing. Like, it's a work in progress.
Amazing. And for someone like you who's been in the domain for many years, you've clearly developed a process of your own, and you'll have people who are joining you that are raw or new to this domain.
Yes.
How much time does it take for them to same get to I'm not saying at the same level where you are in terms of thought process, but at least be comfortable with adopting that framework? Because one is receiving the framework and say, okay, act on it, and the other is believing that, hey, this framework actually works.
Yes. So, everybody kind of develops their own method, right? So, like you correctly said, I have a very structured way of thinking, right? There are other fund managers in my team who have developed their own work. So they have been in the industry for, like, some have been for 10 years, some 15, 20, 25, 30 years, right? So everybody develops their own framework, and it may not be as structured. So some people simplify it even further, right? In terms of, so that there are fund managers who will only talk to a few sell side analysts or strategists. They will not even bother reading reports of anybody else, talking to anybody else, because based on their experience, they know who they need to talk to and what are the questions to ask, or what are the data points to focus on regarding any stock or any sector or the economy, right? Mm, so that's one way to do it, right? The other way is, like I said, where I have kind of a framework, a thought process, data points that I track, and that's also because as part of my job, I'm expected to do it as the head of knowledge management. Like, I know I have a couple of people who I work with to kind of maintain a repository of all these data points and beyond all that. But even from my own personality point of view, this kind of structured thinking is more suitable for me. So, like, it has worked for me. So it's a very personal thing. Just like, in sports, every athlete has their own path to success. I mean, like, how Virat Kohli does his training. I don't think Rohit Sharma trains the same way, right? So each of them has their own way of training. So
Very well said, Vinod. And I think on that segue, what do you do outside of work that allows you to maintain this sense of calm and peace? In this complicated world. I wouldn't say chaotic. I'll say complicated world.
yes, yes. No, so I fortunately developed an interest in running when I was in the US. I had two bosses who used to do ultra marathons,
Wow.
running, cycling, swimming, and they were older to me by almost a decade, but they were fitter than me. So that got me motivated, because like most Indians in the US didn't really get involved in a lot of sports. All the facilities were there, right? But then I started running there, and then when I came back to India, I ran this half marathon, the Mumbai half marathon. That gave me even more motivation. I started training and I started running the full marathon. So I have completed six Mumbai full marathons of 42 kilometers.
Whoa.
So
Congratulations.
yes, thanks. And now, running is part of my daily life. So, during COVID, when we were stuck at home, fortunately for me in 2019, I bought a treadmill to keep in my home against the wishes of my family, of course. But it worked out very well because the 2 years during COVID, when we couldn't go out most of the time, I had a good schedule. Like in the morning, I used to run 1 hour on the treadmill from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. and in the evening again from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. 1 hour. So that used to kind of start my day and end my day as far as the work was concerned. That was a good breaking points as such. And I also got very fit because of that. Now, since we have started going back to office, and because morning I have to get a lot of reading done also, and so my morning run is not happening now, but I do my evening run with discipline. So I've found that running, jogging, walking, these activities really help me just to clear my mind. In terms of most of my many good ideas have come to me when I've been walking, going for a long walk or a long run. A lot of clarity comes at that time. Some things that have been troubling me, it might be on my personal front, family front, work front, what I've discussed with my colleagues or my boss, or it might be regarding the market. Like suddenly some thought will come regarding oh, I didn't think of this, let me go back and think of that. Right. So one is, of course, it helps me to be fit physically, but it also provides a lot of clarity. So that is one activity. Of course, that has been, I've been doing it for more than a decade now. So kind of, it's become a part of me now. So if I don't do my run or my walk, it's kind of, I feel that I've missed something in the day.
It's an unnatural feeling in the
Exactly,
body.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And the other thing now, like I said, I've started being a bit more active on social media, like in terms of communicating my thoughts and seeing, what the responses are, and kind of that. So one, running or walking is like the exercise for the body, also helps the mind. And I've realized, initially, like I said, I was doing a lot of reading. I take a lot of notes, I write, and I started thinking just how I can send 5 key bullet points, 5 insights to my team and to a sales team and all that. I started doing that, and now I'm doing that, kind of sharing my thoughts on social media also. And my aim is the same, like how I can just share 5 key insights, in anything that I put up, basically. And that again, I think of it like an exercise for my mind, right? So it helps both my exercise both your body and your mind every day. And now if I don't do my run or walk, or if I don't share my thoughts, then again I feel like oh, something haven't achieved something in the day. So that's how it's happening.
No, I empathize completely with you, and I've read your work, especially on LinkedIn, where you share this material quite a bit,
Yes.
and it's easy to connect with it. Even from someone who's not in that industry, like you write in a way that is accessible to anyone. Like anyone can understand this. So thank you, and I hope you keep on doing that.
Yes, yes, Hemang, my objective when I started writing on social media, I thought, okay, what's the purpose? Why should I write? And now I have a clear purpose. Like my aim is to simplify the world of finance and investing in an entertaining way, right? So when I write, my target audience is my wife, my immediate family members, because they are not from the world of finance. And if I try to tell them something, kind of, they say it's too technical, like, we don't understand. So, or even if I try to simplify it, maybe they find everything interesting. So then I have to think of, okay, how to make it a little bit more interesting, entertaining. And like, you must also be experiencing, as an as you do it more and more, as you share your thoughts on social media, you use different formats, you learn too, like, what works, what doesn't, and what to change, how to improve. So I'm going through that process.
Yeah, from a completely selfish perspective, it helps me think better. When
Exactly.
I write, it's similar to teaching for me.
Yes.
That when I teach, that those concepts are reinforced at a much higher level than when I'm just a learner.
Exactly.
And the same funda applies when I write, because that idea has to go through various modifications, both mentally and then like on the keyboard, before a person can read it. So
Exactly.
it's a deeply selfish goal.
Yes. No, I completely agree with you. Like, even when I write, it brings so much clarity, and writing at different levels brings even more clarity. So when I, read and communicate with my team, investments team, because, they understand the technicalities, the communication is in a different way, right? Whereas when I'm communicating with my sales and marketing team, it's a bit more simplified. When I'm writing to the financial advisors, mutual fund distributors, it's slightly more simplified. When I'm writing on social media, it's even more simplified. Like, there I have my family in mind. Like, can they understand? Will they find it interesting? Right. So, like you correctly said, just noting down your thoughts and then communicating in at all these levels brings more clarity to myself too. And that's a very good point.
So Vinod, where can people follow you? Where can they read about what you're sharing?
So one is definitely on LinkedIn, where I share my thoughts on a daily basis, and the second is on Twitter. I share my thoughts on Twitter also, and lately now I've started experimenting with a video format, short videos. So I started sharing them on LinkedIn first, and let's see. I've recently started a YouTube channel and Instagram page. So I have to become more active in that, but I'm experimenting with all these different formats.
Sure, I'll share those handles for the respective platforms and all that in the show notes. So
Sure.
so I guess if you're listening and if you're tuning in wherever, please follow Vinod. He writes in a very simple manner. Trust me, you will have amazing takeaways if you follow what he's sharing. So on
Great.
that note, Vinod, thank you so much. This was a fun conversation. I learned a whole lot from you, and good to know that this engineering mindset does help in complicated worlds as well. And
Yes. No,
hope you
thanks.
keep on running and keep on writing.
Yes. Thanks, Emang. It was absolutely a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And I realized that even you kind of seem like you put a lot of thought into what you do and what you mentioned in terms of how sharing helps us to improve ourselves. Right. I think at the end of the day, many of us do that. Like, in terms of, that's a way of improving ourselves, and you feel that you get the tangible feeling that yes, I am learning something new. I am improving myself. So it's a great thing to do.
True that, completely agree. So on that note, let's end this particular episode for now. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thanks. Thank you.